Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Gregory Wilbert, coming to you from Berlin, Germany. This past weekend, voters in one of Germany's smallest states, in Saarland, gave the Christian Democratic Party of Chancellor Angela Merkel an important boost in her effort to seek re-election later this year. Her party increased its share in the small state by 5% to 40% of the state's regional parliament. Meanwhile, the Social Democratic Party stagnated at 30%, and the Socialist Party, Die Linke, or the Left, came in at little over 12%, one of its lowest results in that state since the party's founding in 2007. Joining me here in Berlin to analyze the results and the panorama for the upcoming national vote in September is Victor Grossman. Victor is author of Crossing the River, a memoir of the American left, the Cold War, and life in East Germany, and writes regularly about German politics. Thanks for being here with me in Berlin, Victor.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
One of the recent developments here in German politics has been the rather surprising turnaround of the Social Democratic Party, or the SPD. Previously, they've been hovering around or approaching 20% of the vote, but ever since their nomination a couple months ago of its new frontrunner for the national election, Martin Schulze, they've significantly significantly increased their share of the percentage in opinion polls and in elections to approaching that of the CDU of between 30 and 35%. What has been happening, first of all? And the other thing is, of course, that in Saarland, as I mentioned, they didn't get that good a result. So is that boost that the party has gotten from Martin Schulze something more ephemeral, or is there something more to it?
It was an amazing growth after Schulz became head of the party and its main candidate, jumping really from about 20 to about 30 or more, equalizing and sometimes even pushing ahead of the Christian Democrats. This was an amazing development, and it was largely because he's a very magnetic figure who was unknown in domestic politics. He'd only been in European politics, and he made lots of promises of changes in the Social Democratic platform, which had been rather conservative because they were in the government up till they still are. And what he said was really a break with that. This gave him a terrific boost, which took away from many of the other parties, from all the other parties, and seemed to be headed upwards and upwards. What has happened in Saarland is this was stopped. Why? They're still speculating. Partly simply because the Christian Democratic candidate, the woman who won, basically, is very popular too. She's got a charisma, popular candidate. She has a good reputation there. She made some interesting statements in the question of Turkey, which were well received, and perhaps also, and this we'll have to wait and see, it's possible that people are getting over the original great enthusiasm about Schulz and wondering if it's really sincere and if it really will mean a change. And some people are doubting it. It's impossible to tell. It's also impossible to tell whether this surprisingly low vote for the Social Democrats was just one swallow, or was it the springtime for the Christian Democrats again? It was really surprisingly good for them. We'll see in a short time in the next election in North Rhine-Westphalia, which unlike Saarland, which is a very small state, it's in terms of population, it's the biggest. So that this will be a real sign of whether the Schulz upturn was just luck or short-lived, or whether it really can make a difference.
The other big issue, of course, is the role of the left, or Die Linke. They're hoping very sincerely that for the elections in September that they will be able to form in a coalition with the Social Democrats and with the Greens, or so-called red-red-green coalition. But it's not clear whether that will happen, partly because the Social Democrats and also, just like the other parties, the Greens and the Christian Democrats, have stigmatized and tried to marginalize the left party because of its past as being part of the government of East Germany before unification. So what's going to happen? What do you think? Will they be able to join in a coalition if they should get enough votes come September 24?
First of all, one should note that there have been coalitions in East Germany. In fact, in one state, it's a coalition led by the Linke, the left, but not in West Germany. And the hope was really in Saarland, because the founder of the party, this Oskar Lafontaine, is still very popular in his home state of Saarland. It was a disappointment because he had been doing about 16%, but not in recent months. And obviously the left party, Linke, also lost to Schulz. A lot of people thought, well, Schulz is saying the same things that the Linke, but he has much more chance of getting them done. So that perhaps 3% moved from the Linke towards towards the Christian Democrats, towards the Social Democrats, but away from the Linke. About the question of coalition, yeah, if the Social Democrats really are on the upwards trend, getting 30% or more, and if the Greens and the Linke don't lose too many votes, then there is a very real possibility in September, after the federal election, that a coalition of these three parties will be considered, since the Christian Democrats don't get more than 32% or 35% maybe, and their possible coalition partner is also not so big. This vote in Saarland sort of dampened down the chances of this, because there obviously will be no such coalition in Saarland, as some had hoped. I should mention, however, that there are doubts about such a coalition, especially on the federal level. It's true that up until now, on the federal level, both the Social Democrats and the Greens have said, not with these Linke, as long as they take a position, certain positions that they do take, we cannot work with them. And on the other hand, some people in the Linke party, it's actually in their program, said unless they make changes in a different direction, we can't work with them. Would it have been possible to bridge these differences? The main difference between the groups, between the left on the one hand and the SPD, Social Democrats and Greens on the other, is the question of German armed forces going outside of Germany. They are now already in Afghanistan in the war. They're taken part in Mali. They have planes flying over Syria. They have artillery stationed in Turkey. The left says none of that. The German military, looking back at history, the German military should stay inside Germany as its constitution originally stated. The Social Democrats and the Greens say no, no, no. They supported the Afghanistan war and Mali. They say no, the German military forces are now part of the world forces. We're a major country again. We don't have to worry about our past before 1945. Perfectly legitimate, especially if the UN supports it. And this is a key question, which was the main block between a possible coalition. However, there are groups within the left party who say, we should make a compromise on that. We should all consider working with NATO, as they did in Yugoslavia, Germany. We should consider, we don't have to be so strict on this question. Other people within the left party say, no, if we make a compromise on the question of German military forces outside Germany, then we are no longer a peace party. And that was our main claim to really being something different. We were the party for peace, not for military involvement. This is the question practically standing in front of us up until the September election. There is still a chance that the Greens, the Social Democrats, and the left could form a government if both sides are willing to make a compromise. However, the Social Democrats and the Greens, or especially the Social Democrats, are much stronger. Whether the Linke, the left, could get a change seems dubious. And that is, I think, a major question facing Germany today.
Well, we're going to have to continue this in a second part of this interview. So please stay tuned for part 2 of this interview.